Hi, everyone. Welcome to an event for the COVID Cultural Commissioning Fund's preview showcase, Creation in the Time of Change. I'm your host, Daphne Stanford. In this video, you will hear literary works from many CCC Fund awardees. Viewer discretion is advised, as there may be adult content or language. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the following sponsors: the J.A. and Catherine Albertson Family Foundation, the Treefort Music Fest, the Velma V. Morrison Center for the Performing Arts, the Extra Mile Arena, the Boise City Department of Arts and History, and the community at large. Our first reader is Catherine Kyle. Catherine Kyle is the author of Shelter in Place, Coronations, and other poetry collections. She teaches creative writing and literature at the College of Western Idaho. Her CCC Fund project focuses on domestic fabulism.
Hi, I'm Catherine Kyle, and first off, I just want to say thank you to the whole CCC team, as well as Cyril's Place, for giving me the opportunity to have a residency. And I'm going to read 10 poems today, and 5 of them were written during the residency, and 5 are from other spots during the pandemic. So thank you again. Okay, so this first one is called The Living Net, and it is inspired by some stories that came out pretty early on in the pandemic about wildlife returning to certain places like Venice, a National Geographic article that unfortunately debunked those stories, and a scientific report article on certain behaviors going viral. So it's called The Living Net. So the story wasn't true. The dolphins, the swans, gleaming through the waters of Venetian canals. Their bodies were not suspended in liquid, the color of blue raspberry, another falsity. The article says that people had hoped it was a silver lining, a sliver of good news. It uses the word meaning, that meaning might be suctioned from images of swimmers in resurrected streams. An editor's note, though, almost apologetic, links to true stories it calls wonder-inducing, as if a consolation prize, as if meaning is fragile, as if it does not want to crush it. So I read that in Australia, a bright magenta manta ray named Inspector Clouseau is healthy and content. 11 feet long, a pink panther of the deep, he glides through salty waves. I read that in Washington, a fisher named Katie, a weasel-like mammal, was released to the wild, that humans are trying to bolster the species they once all but wiped out for its fur. I read that in Germany, new photographs of honeybees show how they collaborate to overcome new threats. The bees swarm a hornet, their hairy bodies vibrating. The hornet is smothered in heat. And in the heat, the bees ferry water to each other. And in the cold, they latch onto each other's furry legs. A living quilt, the author says, a living net of warming, a living net that will not let go. Scientists studying social phenomena say either, it turns out, can catch on, that either can go viral, rumors or reality, callousness or care. Maybe then so can something like purpose. Maybe then so can something like hope. Okay, this next one is called Cipher. And again, I wrote this pretty early on in the pandemic. The cat, for once, stays on her leash and sits beside me in the driveway, purring. I'm turning another year older today. I'm stretching out my bare legs. I marinate in sun. On my left, the spring grass has already grown enormous. It wavers like a twirled skirt in wind. On my right, the dandelion tufts puff out like smoke breath, exhaled from rounded lips. I have come here to contemplate a miniature pilgrimage, so small it could tuck inside a hollow sugar egg. I have crossed the tiny threshold from kitchen wood to hot concrete in the hopes of locating transcendence. The cat yawns and gleams, the light warms my shins, and a spider half the size of my hand clutches the side of the shed. We distance, my heart is thrumming. I picture his leap and his bite. But I stay here, back against the sliding glass door. I stay here, watching petals fall like stirred up floral snow. I respect his presence, respect the threat, a creature known in Old English as both poison and weaver, one who destroys and connects, ambiguous eight-legged cipher. In plum blossom air, I am afraid, but also as the pavement glows, peaceful, reverent. The spider is part of the scene, but so is the cat, so is the garden, so am I. Confession. We were chopping onions, and I tell you casually about the time when I was 9 and I sulked in a tree on an island in Puget Sound for hours. The other kids and I had been playing Star Wars, and a boy said that he was Luke Skywalker. When my friends and I played in our concrete schoolyard, it was me who was always Luke. You're a girl, the boy said. You have to be Princess Leia. So I turned on my heel and left. Barefoot, I climbed a tree that overlooked salt water, fortressed myself in its leaves. I listened to waves foam their lives out on logs and the scream of alley space fights in the distance. I sat there in green, feeling something like a boy and something like a girl, something like an unknown world. That was the same summer I fell off a rope swing onto a wet branch that lodged in my foot. A doctor had to extract the wood with an implement that looked like pliers, but I didn't flinch or cry out. In fact, I watched him pull, hands gripping crinkling paper of the elevated bed. I have never told anyone this, I tell you, how I haunted that tree for hours, caught between fury and nonchalance, learning the quiet of myself, the way silence can be a sanctuary. But these are power outage times, though our light bulbs still hum. By power outage rules, you offer secrets. Steam rises between us from the boiling silver pot, a substance existing in two states at once, liquid and vapor, reminding us it's possible. It doesn't just have to be one. I sweep with my clean knife chopped onion into water. The fragments bubble, stirred up moons, now visible, now gone. Snapshots. This morning, as I walked through the park as green as a freshly cut lime wedge, the sun shouting light through the gaps between ducks and wisteria, a cyclist called, "On your left," so gently, it felt like a caress, a lullaby. And the man at the zero waste market explained how to compost my carryout box. And the man who made my coffee seemed genuinely glad when he told me they had all the plant-based milks. The world is full of pain, suffering that creeps and corrodes like rust, and my heart feels sick for the people I cannot help, those I know and those I do not. My mouth an empty hand. This morning, I wanted to rip up my front lawn, replace it with wildflowers, return something that espouses to be flawless to the state of honest chaos it belongs in. The park is so beautiful, the river and its flowing, the poppies and bachelor buttons, the dogs gnawing frisbees and the paddleboarders dipping their oars, leaving silvery trails. Anyone who wants to should feel this warmth on their face, smell the flowering plum trees. You and I, we are alive today, and that means we can do something good. Where is there cellophane where there should be water? Put your shovel there, rupture its crust. Twilight. The cat comes to the back screen door and scratches the aluminum. She wants to be let in. I have no child, so she is my child, and I dote on her. I kneel to oblige. There is a gold leaf right below her left ear, in the space where her eyebrow would be. I brush it with the backs of my fingers, wanting to clean my child up. Only it was not a leaf, it was a spider, and now I have crushed it carelessly. I brushed it so gently. My cat's huge pupils take me in as I mouth, "I'm so sorry." I did not mean to harm it, but my fingers were large and clumsy on its small spider body. What disasters are stirring in me that I cannot yet be aware of? What oblivious damage? And what latent lightning sits in you that could tumble like loose logs off the back of a truck? If God is a spider, I want to say mercy, as his, her, or their enormous legs brush across the world. I want to say spare me, for I am so small. I want to say grant me exemption from the cycle of life and death. I want no part in it. But God seems to say, as I water the mint plants, the discs of sun and moon in the twilight ocular, look at what you sow and look at what you reap and try to do more of the former. Mud pools around my feet in the garden, and I hope it will help some roots below me grow. I am not enough, but I am trying. The angel of brunch. The angel pulls his hair up into a bun. He is wearing flip-flops in my kitchen. Light filters through the chrysanthemum curtains, and he sizzles 2 eggs sunny side up. He got them from a friend's backyard chicken. I am standing beside him, mixing citrus bread batter in a transparent bowl with a wood spoon. I ask him what is sacred. Everything? Nothing? The feeling I get when I lock eyes with someone and our hearts say what's in them without speaking. The angel scratches the back of his neck, pulls the half-gallon of orange juice from the fridge. He shakes it, then hands me the measuring cup, which I hold over the batter as he pours. Yes, he says, that, but also, you know that feeling you get when you have to mouth the words to the song on your headphones, even when you're on a public bus? And the way your cat always starts on your belly but slides to the left in the night? Those two, he says, tapping the side of the measuring cup with his plastic spatula's lip. At its touch, the liquid there burnishes to sunlight, amber nectar glowing like a flood lamp. I tilt it and empty out the luminous pulp, a waterfall of gold as if we're forging. I stir and stir the blessing in until the whole room is radiant. The angel of slumber parties. She is the kind of angel who will scoop the praline ice cream extra large, a sugar moon. She lifts the bowls like barbells as she sits on my couch. She's wearing my Vanessa Carlton shirt. Between her toes are the foam pads used to keep nails apart when they are drying. Earlier we used the face masks my mom sent, and now we duel in Mario Kart. Outside, the leaves look dipped in carnelian as constellations rise above our heads. Inside, the furnace kicks on as we fluff up our pillows and pull up our quilts. It is a privilege to be here. The walls are popping and settling in their familiar song. For now, we are safe, a fact so arbitrary, it makes me want to weep. This next one is a little bit more recent, and it was inspired by an art piece I saw that was a collaboration between an artist named Rosalind Fisher and a lace company, where it combined a photograph of a tear under a microscope and lace, and it made a dress that was made of lace. So pretty cool. So, weeping gown. Let it be hemmed at the waist, royal blue. Let the skirt flow like a coastline. When I dance in it, let the train spiral behind me, continuous circling lace. Concentric whirlpool, me at the center. Let it have a sweetheart neckline. Let the lace aura my shoulders like exhaled breath when it's freezing outside. Let it be beautiful. Let it be terrible. Let me dance long after midnight. Let me put on my weeping gown. If they turn to lace, let there be tears. Okay, romance in Davy Jones' locker. He is cooking me seafood linguine. The counter is littered with garlic and shells. He murmurs that the white wine sauce is what turns salt to tang. He is wearing an apron to indulge me, wipes wet brine on his pinstriped folds. His hands are coral reefs, chopping each onion, in candlelight in his long hair. I wind my fingers into his beard like clownfish seeking refuge. I kiss him and taste the drowning of stars, moonlit melancholy, cloistering of pearls, this man, a mouth of shipwrecks, an underwater trench. Okay, and this last one, I am a teacher and I make a lot of syllabi, so this is called Syllabus Poem. Course title, Survival 101. Prerequisites, come as you are. This is all hypothetical anyway. Course description. In this class, students will learn the basics of yam and peanut butter sandwiches. In this class, students will talk about how difficult it is to be a human. But also in this class, we will talk about how to manage our own bullshit, to be better peers, how to be better peers to each other and to earthworms and leopards and everybody else. See, I recently slashed my own thumb and became blood sisters with the whole blur of the world. Our rule will be, if it can hurt, don't hurt it. Apologize if you do. In this class, we will talk about planting rose bushes in the spokes of the wheels that would grind us. We will learn the fundamentals of singing to the roses, watering them and watching them grow. In this class, we will nap. There's a whole nap chapter, a unit on sleeping in. See, I've never liked my sun sign, but lately I have realized I'm dubiously mortal, so I'm Taurusing it up. Your textbook is potato chips. Your textbook is this quilt. Your homework is the way the morning light falls on your lover's hair. Your homework is the texture of your pet's sandpaper paw. Revel in the knowing that the fact that these cost nothing makes the charging bull of Wall Street stamp his hoof and pout his lip. I don't know very much about not being afraid, but we'll learn it together in this class. I don't know very much about being happy, but I'm doing outside research on how vegan ricotta is actually not bad and goes well in pasta shells. The results of this test are promising. I'm learning the basics of dancing in the kitchen in high heels mid dystopian nightmare. How insisting that our spirits keep their grip on this hurtling earth is, I think, still worthwhile. Attendance policy. Attend to your bluebells, attend to your bees, attend to that shred in your t-shirt. Attend to correspondence that you think you may have ripped irrevocably. Attend to your dog. Attend to the things that sear in your chest that would cause you to drunkenly tear someone down. Or soberly, attend to your softness. Here, there are no weapons allowed. Grades. The grade of a hill, the slope of your friend's jaw. Study how these make you feel. Here, there is no need to prove yourself, to strangle your interests into gold. Here, we will laugh as the targeted marketing robot scratches his head, struggling to sell us 12 packs of loofahs and clocks shaped like bell peppers. Its sensors will not compute. We'll invite the robot in, knit him a sweater, reprogram him to do something helpful. Like that robot who names paint swatches funny things, peach froyo, lark aftershave, glitter oh the toe. We'll name the robot Lucky or Spot. Late work. You may turn in work late if you're caught in a global crisis. You may turn in work late if you're caught in a national crisis. You may turn in work late if you're caught in a personal crisis. Please take care of your one and only self. Lateness is a construct anyway. Required materials. A wand of your choice to unsnare your kindness. I recommend daisies or buttercups. A heart that is not itching, its finger on the trigger to become someone's worst nightmare. Bring your bright hope and its star-drizzled audacity, its beacon that will signal something new. Thanks.
Our next reader is Hannah Rodabaugh. Hannah Rodabaugh is the author of With Words, Verse in Concordance, We Don't Bury Our Dead When Our Dead Are Animals, and We Traced the Shape of Our Loss to See Your Face. She's been published in Anti-Narrative Journal, Berkeley Poetry Review, Roar Magazine, Horse Less Review, Kane Literary Journal, and Written River, among others. She's received grants from the Idaho Commission on the Arts and the Alexa Rose Foundation, and has twice been an artist in residence for the National Park Service. Her CCC Fund project is poetry that uses archival documents and first-person accounts to write about historical and present pandemics.
I'm going to be reading some poems about the Second Plague Pandemic from 1347 to 1700, and some poems about COVID-19, with an occasional reference to the 1918 flu pandemic. And these poems are part of a collection of poetry I'm writing that retells stories from eyewitness accounts and primary sources about historical pandemics. And I want to start with a couple of quotes. Here's the first one. If you wish to bemoan the fates of all mortal men, one breast and one tongue will not suffice for you. Petrarch, 1349. And here's the second. Among which matter of marvel, let me tell you one thing, which if the eyes of many, as well as mine own, had not seen, hardly could I be persuaded to write it, much less to believe it, albeit a man of good credit should report it. Boccaccio, 1349. So the first 5 poems I'm going to read are about the bubonic plague, the second bubonic plague pandemic. And the first one is about comets. So there were accounts of comets preceding outbreaks of the Black Death in Europe. And it usually caused a lot of rioting and terror, and people behaved in crazy ways afterwards. And this is kind of about that. And I have one quote before I read the poem. It says, "The comet stands above our head, flagellum die, the scourge of God, a cruel tyrant." It's from an anonymous source from 1683. Under the comet, people lifted up their terror to new heights. Everyone foretold the end of the world. The markets closed. We lived on dry bread and sacks of grain. The foods we fed our livestock. Mists hugged the ground, became animals like wolves. We lost the ability to reason, begged for mortuary candles in the dark. We sewed ourselves into funeral shrouds for easy handling by grave diggers. We gave out microscopic gestures, walked among the village throng, touching the clothes of others to get them sick. Meaning only matters when it is carried into the future. We were delirious. We climbed to the tops of buildings and hurled tiles into the street till shot by guards. We danced till our hearts gave out bells on our clothes like jesters. We lay in our unplowed fields, pigs in midden heaps eating corpses. Then we were into the earth with so many others. Death begets company. Somebody told a joke, rattled us apart, became bone churches, Prima Vista of clavicle, Our Lady of femurs. When someone visits us, we don't know what to say to them. We stare down a great chimera as walls and walls of skulls. We count our names when we can remember them or say old plague proverbs. Such a one is dead, another is dying, we once had said. We almost remember the sky before movement pierced it. We remember silence, then nothingness, then the hazy sky streaked with light. A miasma compelling the earth till the seas ran red and the mares ate their foals, till there was no one left alive to guard the criminals, and so they poured out, sullied the world, became everyday people, crying in the dirt, abandoning neighbors, robbing bodies in the street. The next poem I'm going to read is called Patience Waits for a Sign. So there were a lot of natural phenomena that people of that time period also thought might signal a plague or an outbreak of a disease. This is about another one of these natural phenomena. And I have a quote before the poem by the historian Johannes Knoll. And it says, in the year 1501, small crosses the color of blood fell on the clothes of the people, even on those stowed in chests and drawers. And I have a quote I use here inside the poem from Macbeth. It's so foul and fair a day we had not seen. So that's from Macbeth. Patience waits for a sign. In 1501, the sky stripped out a sign until we did not know ourselves. Each cross could be interpreted. Pathetic fallacy as bored sublunary as the skies rained blood. The cloud laid jets of blood and the mares ate their foals. The seas came up and took the young from their mother's arms. We thought we saw. So foul and fair a day we had not seen, we said. Later it was found to be the excretions of butterflies, and we felt ashamed. We pulled out our cross clothes riddled with marks like reliquary. We saw how the world could be interpreted, nothing objective. We changed. We did not change. So the next two poems are from a series I'm writing about poems about kind of these apocryphal women figures of that time period, since women were often not recorded in the historical record during that time. And the first one's called An Intuit This Birth, and I have a quote again from the historian Johannes Knoll. He says, the disease carried off all of Tustedal Bergen, with the exception of one girl. The girl was discovered some years later, but had run wild and was afraid of human beings, and was therefore called a ripe Rajupa after a wild bird. And Intuit This Birth. It was December. The flowers were tinged with white hoarfrost, dead like Hildegard in Old Ending. The star stung above windswept fields, ruts frozen in streams of dark sludge, earth eaten out like a cankerous sore. And this was where I found you, hidden in an abandoned cart outside silent smithy and crumbling aqueduct. Banui, I said to your crow-dark shadow, form almost malformed, not understanding the art form in which you spoke. Good evening, I said, but you just made an animal moaning, almost inhuman, a mind blanked in darkness. You hid at the sound of speech, mimed with crooked fingers, no diction and no mnemonic, trapped in two uninhabitable worlds. The silence of the village that mirrored your empty tongue. And then the second about these figures is called the Plague Virgin, and it's about a figure that was referred to at the time as the Plague Virgin or the Pestilence Virgin. She was kind of a bastardization of the Virgin Mary, kind of a Virgin Mary that would get you sick. And again, I have a quote from Johannes Knoll. He writes, the Plague Virgin only needs to raise her hand to scatter the plague poison. The spirit was seen in the shape of a blue flame flying through the air and developing on the lips of the dying and dead. Those who saw it rushed away crying, run, the owlet is coming. Plague Virgin. The Virgin waves her toothless fist of money-colored skin, blue caramel melting out her open mouth, her tongue a shard of blue. She's tired of forming on the lips of dying soldiers or fat grannies, their middles tied in half like sacks of grain. Sometimes she leans against the walls of an alley, smokes a cigarette, becoming a film noir, rain washing the streets in tiny torrents. Sometimes she sees a straggler, tries to talk, tries to open her mouth, form words, tries to scream a forlorn numbness. She's trying so hard her hair stands up, blue flame over her head, unholy halo. The stranger falls back dead. She shrugs. Another day, another form of loneliness. And then the last poem I'm going to read about the bubonic plague is kind of about some of the medical advice that was around during that time period, because they didn't have an understanding of germ theory. The medical advice was to simply run away and abandon your loved ones. So I have a couple of quotes before this poem. The first is a German proverb. It says, "The best means against a plague is a pair of new boots used till they break." And the other is another quote from Boccaccio. He says, "One brother forsook another, the uncle the nephew, the sister the brother, and the wife the husband. Fathers and mothers fled away from their own children." And this poem is called How to Walk Away. It's about trying to make sense psychologically of how people could abandon their loved ones when they were sick. How to walk away. Leave them where they lay and simply walk away. Move through the market, keep going, become a new person somewhere else. A cicada splitting out of skin, singing in the afternoon of summer slanted light as it becomes newly unencumbered. Do this because your reptile brain is flooded with light like through stained glass, your amygdala in shades of golden blue. Let it twist inside of you until you're far away. Let it become your animal nature, your soft, unspoken wildness. Let it wear out your body as a skin in shards of feelings. Let it become entwined with you until it can no longer be named like background static. Let it hang a plaque on the pillar of your neck until it reads, "When sickness came, we feared what could kill beyond the body, how only the weak survived." Or, "We feared how when the world became ugly meaner, the world became more true. And we lived here until we walked away from everyone we loved." So I just have 3 more I'm going to read, and these 3 are about the COVID-19 pandemic. And the first one's called On Getting Sick, and it's part of a much longer series of poems all with the same name. COVID-19 on Getting Sick. The sudden weirdness of being a biohazard. Your doctor in a face shield mumbling to you from far away. Across a room, they examine you, ask you questions without touching you, kindness as incidental. How often you took for granted when people touch. How strange it feels to be an island suddenly alone. You'd feel the world moving forward without you, only it's not moving either. Everyone is holding their breath. The agony of waiting to get sick or of getting sick. The sudden dread of it, sudden sense of relief. How calm you feel when the worst thing to happen happens. And lucky, because you're not dying alone in a hospital bed, not tearfully saying goodbye. The agony of waiting to get well. Of waiting and waiting and waiting. This next one's called Night Terror. And I have a quote here from Catherine Porter. It was about her experience during the 1918 flu pandemic. She says, "I lay like a stone at the farthest bottom of life. There was only that pain, only that room. There was only this one moment, and it was a dream of time." So this poem is kind of about the endlessness you feel when you're sick, how time feels like it kind of feels like it slows down. Night Terror. All night you're walking away from you like somebody trying to exit. You're here, but you're not here. Your body isn't yours, belongs to what inhabits it. Habitable is not hospitable. All night high fever brands you, rolling you like the sea, skin a subterranean, stained from inside out, all encompassing in its motility, whole body aphorism. You feel fully awake and 3 doors down from death, 3 clicks away from nothingness, fever a peak experience, obscured field of vision in the same field of view, paroxysm drowning you. All night your heartbeat beats you, your heart leaping away from you, another kind of horse, a pulse lodged in your throat, in this space your only voice. Your body a strange engine, blinking you as traffic lights, trapped in vehicular movement until you're merely momentary, whole body contradiction, wail inside you just under your skin. Your body flashing on and off like lights sucked out to sea, wavy tempered windows of amber, olive, blue. And then this is the last one I'm going to read. It's kind of a funny, lighthearted poem about how we all have to hang together. We're all going to hang separately. with this pandemic. So it's called There's No I in Epidemic. There's no I in epidemic, there's two, which is technically a we, and us. And an us is a community, whole body of other bodies. Despite what patent miscreants might garble, by definition, it is an us, an index case, and somebody else getting sick or waiting to get sick, waiting beyond the stage, strange bird in the act of falling. There's sometimes a me, and that's you, but never a solitary you, never a you all by yourself. That would be an isolated case. A pandemic now, that's worse. That I's in everything. That I's in all our bodies. Every drop of water reflecting its face in every face. So thank you.
Our next reader is Heidi Kraay. Playwright, writer, and theater maker Heidi Kraay examines the connection between brain and body, seeking empathy with fractured characters. She is a member of the Dramatists Guild of America. Heidi's CCC Fund project play, Unwind, Hindsight is 2020, explores stress during this particular moment in history. Based on survey responses from 90+ individuals, Unwind uncovers how stress affects the human body, women's bodies in particular, and the Earth's body. As we careen into a time where recurring pandemic, autocratic, and climate crises overcome us, Unwind asks how we can stay strong, calm, and heal in the face of disaster. Her website is www.heidikraay.com.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm going to start sharing from scene 3 of Unwind with the scientist character Hani giving a presentation. And I'll skip some of that, and as it gets going, also imagine there are 4 other characters in the room with me. At one point, they'll start taking over speaking for Hani, so you can imagine me as 4 different people. And then I'll be reading from scene 7, where you can imagine me as a chorus of 5 different people. Thank you. Unwind, Hindsight is 2020, Part 1, The State of Now. Scene 3. A liminal space, Hani alone, or perhaps not alone, perhaps giving a presentation, lecture to students or colleagues or funders. Is it dream, reality, times before COVID, during, over Zoom? Is she rehearsing? The other 4 women may join her as well to help diagram her argument through movement as assistants and examples, as though they become molecular organisms, cortisol, adrenaline. Stress is killing us. As a species, we evolved from beings with short bursts of adrenaline coursing through just when we needed it, forgetting our problems after they left, to getting smarter and smarter, more and more worried. The ones who survived were the anxious ones who didn't take as many risks, meaning the more we survive as a species, the more stressed out we are as a whole. And the more this condition is destroying us. It's getting worse. We get less equipped to handle our own cortisol responses, like antibodies, fighting off AIDS, killing everything else instead, patient cells attacking their own bodies. I see you thinking, why worry about stress now that the pandemic is killing us off? Because stress is the #1 killer in our contemporary world. Because COVID is a symptom of our larger problem, not the problem itself, because we need to change how we are in our bodies, because we need to take care of each other for real, because we kill the earth the more we disconnect from ourselves, each other, and her, because some days I want to crawl under a blanket and never rise, because I breathe in and out to find center. She tries breathing, but she's spinning out. Because anxiety is this blanket smothering the whole world as the earth heats up. 2019 was the 2nd hottest in our history since we started keeping track. Our stress and anxiety levels are on the same track. And if I'm to find a way to stop it, I need your help. As she trails off, she spins faster. The others drop anything they were doing and watch her, wondering how to help if they should. Anxiety isn't the same as stress, but they're connected. 1/3 of all adults in the US are affected by an anxiety disorder in their lifetime. It's one of the most contagious emotions humans experience. Panic produces more panic. Ingredients for anxiety: a built-up desire that disconnects us from breath, attention at all times on the personal and global and past and future, hustling to get ahead as a body worth existing on this planet, and then big disaster happens, eating out savings. The heat rises in us, on the planet, a fever, a beeping alarm, and you know you should unplug, but how to get away when you're so behind? Your voice gets quiet, too hushed to hear, but booms in your ears, and you burrow under blankets like your cat does in winter, and you try to tear your jaw apart, knowing you need to relax, or you'll let everyone down, and no one will save themselves from evolving more stressed out because they all depend on stupid lucky Jan who gets all the awards by stealing your fucking notes and copying your tests ever since primary. Honey's breath gets tight and she can't talk. She's on the ground, perhaps, looking for air. The other women step in to help, but not by getting close or touching her, staying back and away. Are they speaking for themselves or for her? Stress looks like my face muscles squeezing tight, canines ground flat, front teeth jagged, chipped away. Shoulders hunching, seizing, hands on my head, pulling out steam through clumps of hair. Stress is chest puffing in, out, matching heartbeat, eyes focused everywhere. Earth spinning too fast to keep up, like cancerous cells burned off my cervix, and I smell the smoke. Everything loud, volume overwhelming everywhere. I hear voices, see visions out my eye corners. Everything tastes like sand. High-pitched sounds make me jump 6 feet. Can't sleep. Brain turning, spinning, everything bright. Panic attacks me. Howling banshees come at me, always thirsty. Caffeine implodes my head. Run elliptical, chase monsters away. Snap at loved ones, every task spinning. Like buzzing August flies, like breaking into beehive, like King Kong circled by prop planes, and I don't know where to land my eyes. In sternum, this sliding whoosh, like dropping in roller coaster that builds up until face breaks and everything breaks. Hani reemerges with great breath, gasping, like finding surface above churning ocean. This is an episode. Heavy heartbeat fast with hyperventilation. No breath gets in. Neck a brick column. Stuck in isolated chamber in the middle of a crowd. Voices grow and I know I stick out like flashing red lights. Can't form sentences. Shadows prominent. Shadow people grow from those. Come out to play. Curled up, holding head. Soft moaning like muffled screams. Twitches. I'm far away. Lasting for hours, exhausting me through. Eye contact stabs. Pictures in walls come out to bite. Fear mounts until the spinning stops and I open my eyes. Then sleep knocks me down. Can't rise for hours. Knocked over by a weight of fatigue, Hani collapses into deep sleep on the floor. The others gather round while still keeping some distance. If we were unsure before, we see that they do see her now and each other. Maybe they're not in the same time space. Maybe they are dreaming her and each other all at once at the same time. Part 3, Voices from the Earth, Scene 7. After the quake. The earth speaks as a chorus of the 5 women, each individual voice heard in its distinct range, Sometimes the singular voices speak alone or above the group. The earth speaks with a much slower, enduring quality. She has all the time in the world. She is the world. She has all the time in the solar system. This is a warning. Earlier this spring in our northern hemisphere, in a moment you call Saturday, March 21st, your Pope Francis called everyone to a moment of recollection, no matter their politics, religion, or where they live, for the healing of the world, the whole planet united in prayer. I hear this was seen on the internet platform Facebook by billions of viewers. What you ask for, Pope, is a healing of your people, not of me, not of us. We need more than that. It is time to let go. If you cannot, I will. We will. We have done it before. What you call mass extinctions, our miscarriages. More than 99% of our organisms who ever lived are gone forever. I loved them all as I love you. But humans, you think yourselves so special, important. Let me tell you, I am tired, very tired, and hot. Talk about menopause. I don't need this. Worse is knowing it's your own children making you sick. I am tired of coughing and aching and the fires and the smoke and the melt. You eviscerate my precious babies. You give me asthma. After so long sweltering, my reactions are impossible to manage. I used to try. After losing the graptolites, my first sea babies, I tried resisting the inevitable. When the great dying ended nearly all my life and me with it, I knew it was not up to me. The more I try getting in the stars' way, the more I end up like Mars. I would soon lose the trilobites, conodonts, ammonites, and of course the dinosaurs. They were all individuals to me. And you, I put such hope in you, like a fool, like waiting up all night for a man to send kind word, witnessing your violence, feeling your rage directed on me, hoping for something different this time, this century, this eon. I lost our Neanderthals as my magnet spun, ice ages and drought, flood, plague, but mostly you handled your own dying, ages of war, genocide, yet still here you thrive, you multiply, you weigh me down. You kill billions year after year, another species ravaged, gone every minute, while you infect me like cancer. Still, I love you all the same. Stupid is a mother's love when her children are raging sociopaths, certain this world was made for you. I was not. Even so, even though I no longer try to stop the devastation, I do my best to warn you as I share my life with you. I want you to see how bad it can get. Use your impressive imagination. This plague is the beginning. You bring an onslaught the longer you live. I do not wish to destroy you, but I will to save the rest, or rather you will, digging your own graves. You are only a speck, all 7 billion of you. Ants outweigh you, sharks outlast you, clams outlive you. Listen, smell that. Since the virus, my air is clearing. You know it, you report it. Embrace the clean air. When this trouble passes for you, millions of human lives later, that will not be time to return to normal. There is no more normal. Slow down. Be with me. Let that be your normal. Quiet your urges. Stop your mad, constant go, go, go. Or, as your researchers predict, you will look back on this virus with nostalgia as the good old days. And when you're gone, everyone will forget about you. My new babies will build homes on your graves. Listen to me. Finally listen, or disappear. The dragon is coming. The women and the earth transform into starlight. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Thanks to everyone who's putting all of this together and for being here. And of course, thanks to my co-creator, Kate Kraay, and the CCC Fund. Take care, everybody.
Our next reader is Amy Pence-Brown. Amy Pence-Brown is a fat feminist mother who believes in opening her mouth and her heart. From both of these places, she tells stories as a writer, historian, and visual artist. She has been an internationally known body image activist for the past 11 years and leads people to body liberation through public speaking and education, including on the TEDx stage, in the press, at national conferences, in classrooms and camps to students young and old, and in the Boise Rad Fat Collective, a radical Facebook group with 2,400 people. Pence-Brown is currently working on a body of work called Poems in a Pandemic, writing about things like parenting 3 kids, homeschooling, sex, fear, bodies, joy, politics, death, and more.
Hi, I'm Amy Pence-Brown, writer, artist, and body image activist. I'm honored to be here today, reading a few of what I call poems in a pandemic that I've been writing over the course of 2020 for you. As I began to become more critical of diet culture and how it's driven by consumerism for at least probably the last 15 years now, I fully rejected it and began speaking out, making art and writing about bodies, specifically the pervasive nature of fat phobia, about 11 years ago. And I wasn't surprised to see it rear its ugly head with a vengeance in healthism during coronavirus. People commenting about gaining the quarantine 15 in reference to the freshman 15 weight gain, and now losing the COVID-19. This poem is called Quarantine 15. Almost right away, they began the memes, jokes, photos, lamenting cookies, couches, calories. The fear of fat, so great, paranoid about a few pounds, so shackled to a scale, weighed down by shame, in the middle of the most destructive global pandemic of our lifetimes, still consumed by bullshit beauty standards. As a feminist academic and writer, I love to learn the history of words. I like to play with double entendres. I love to subvert and challenge and reclaim words, and I do it often in my work and activism. Words like bitch, slut, and fat. Here, I'm taking on the word antibody. Antibody. The German physician and scientist who cured syphilis called it anticorpor, but medical historians say it probably should have been called antitoxin instead, as it means against a toxin, not against a body. Although there is perhaps no better time in America than a pandemic to highlight how anti-body we really are. Anti-Black body, anti-fat body, anti-Asian body, anti-trans body, anti-poor body, anti-female body. We are not protected or immune to any of it. While COVID-19 is a natural disaster of sorts, the earth has also continued to shake things up as well, with things like magnificent earthquakes, hurricanes, wildfires, and more. This poem is titled Spring Storm. My little boy said it was scarier than the earthquake by far. He couldn't stop shaking and didn't want to be alone. In typical Idaho spring style, the warning came suddenly on our phones. After an 80-degree day and just before a planned bike ride, to grab your garden seedlings and move your cars to the garage because hail the size of golf balls and 60-mile-per-hour winds were expected soon. We moved patio furniture and covered the sandbox, but the black sky moved fast and loud. We couldn't close the windows in enough time and ran outside to save tablecloths from blowing away, art from being destroyed, toys from being broken. My husband slipped and fell on his back, drenched. We huddled inside as the thunder shook our walls and the wind blew down trees and shingles off roofs and our neighbor's fence. Boom! The power went out for 9 hours, and we dared not open the fridge full of precious sustenance, fearful of losing food so necessary. We played games and put on headlamps, barbecued some dinner, pretending we were camping, trying to remain calm and teach our children how sometimes we can do nothing but stay inside and wait it out. Sometimes it's painfully slow and boring, but that's how you weather a storm. As a mother, I found it tricky to navigate my sexuality. As two adults and parents who like to have sex, we found it even trickier to find time and privacy to do it with 3 small children who never leave the house now and are constantly by our sides. This poem is an ode to parents who fuck. We often use holidays as an excuse to lock the bedroom door, undress, shut the windows, bend over the unmade bed, whisper. We tell them we've got gifts to wrap, eggs to fill, lists to discuss, plans to make in privacy that doesn't exist. Even though you're the Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, and Santa Claus, sometimes you lie to make your own magic happen. And another poem titled Safe. Sometimes when I have a really intense orgasm, I cry, hot, loud sobs come gushing out with lust, love, sorrow, fear, frustration, snot, and relief to be on you or under you, sweating and smashed down to the earth together because your body is my safest place. Your belly, my altar to bear my soul when it's hard to breathe. I imagine curling up inside your belly button like our daughter's tiny hamster we found terrified of the world in the back of our closet behind my shoe, swirled into a tiny ball like lint. I could hide there, protected by the soft flesh of your stomach for just a little while longer. Parenting has always been a challenge for me because the love and responsibility for my 3 children is intense. And parenting during a pandemic and in the current state of affairs in America is amplified and, quite frankly, terrifying. This poem is an ode to pandemic school I call Choices. It's hard to choose between your child's safety and their mental health when you don't really know the difference between tempting fate and taking a calculated risk. It's hard to handle teaching while having a breakdown when you keep shutting down like your modem, overloaded with Google Meet, Zoom, Fuel Ed, iReady, Seesaw. It is hard to make breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 99 snacks when your throat hurts from yelling. It is hard to know how to let them go out into such a dangerous place when you can't see because your eyes are swollen shut from crying. It is hard to handle one more thing when your patience is as thin as the old t-shirt you've worn for the last 6 months. It is hard to understand that maybe this is the education. One of the reasons we decided to move our family back to Idaho 14 years ago was its plethora of wild public land and small population. Both of these things are changing rapidly, though, and it continues to be important to take our kids camping and hiking, as it continues to be important to talk openly with them about death, now maybe more than ever. This poem is titled Carcass. One of the reasons we moved back here to our homeland was due to its remoteness, wildness, spaciousness, people-lessness. Lush forests and wide deserts are our backyard. We have secret, secluded spots, paths, creeks, campgrounds we've claimed all our own for years, so we were shocked to see 5 cars at the trailhead and so many families on our trail. It seems everyone is desperate to escape. We kept our distance, stepped to the side to let them pass when my 6-year-old spotted a dead deer in a clearing. He ran right up to it, and we all followed. We talked about the maggots, blood, bones. He noticed tufts of fur nearby and made up an animated tale about the animal's death. He speculated about a coyote, maybe a wolf, and the gruesome battle to survive, and asked me, "Am I right, Mama?" But I said, "It is hard to know exactly what happened when the creature died, because there was no one here to witness it." As a Libra and a type A personality, I love to keep and make lists. They help me feel calmer, they help me organize the world, they help me process things. The list in this poem is one that got so long that I decided to turn part of it into a poem. It's titled Broken. Our main sewer pipe connecting our house to the system by the roots of our apple tree. Democracy. His heart when he said goodbye to his kindergarten teacher on a computer screen. Our police system. Her dream of a 12th birthday party in the park with those giant inflatable balls you put your whole body in. Black mothers' hearts. My favorite vintage lawn chair. The Wi-Fi, again and again and again. Our concrete patio from the earthquake. His faith in what is right. The last of our intact bedroom doors, a hole kicked in it by my angry son. Civil discourse. And the Confederacy, finally. The kitchen sink because I shoved half a cake down it. Our friendship. My plans for buying a minivan, the garden gate, voting, another air mattress, bicycle gears, so many glasses, a huge limb off the pear tree, his scooter because his sister ran over it with the lawnmower. Connection with each other. Our backyard swimming pool with 3 punctures from rocks. We carefully patched them in hopes it could just hold water a little longer. Thank you. Thank you to the CCC, COVID Fund, the Morrison Center, Boise City Arts and History, and Treefort for funding a little bit of my creative activism during this time.
Our next reader is Shriram Sivaramakrishnan. Shriram is a second-year student at BSU's MFA program and a proud alumnus of the Seamus Heaney Center for Poetry in the UK. His CCC fund is about exploring virility as a sociolinguistic process, rather than a phenomenon.
Hi, my name is Shriram. I'm a second-year student at BSU's MFA program. And so my project is based on the connection between virality and language as a process that mutates, And so while language mutates, the virus morphs, or the other way around. And that's so I wrote a couple of poems, used Google Translator to translate them into different languages. But the languages that I chose were according to the way the virus moved. And so I created different strains of the same poem. So I'm going to read my original poem and then read different strains that I created using Google Translator. Okay, my original poem is called There is No Assholism in Online Oxford Dictionaries. 1. The dictionary suggests nearest results from other dictionaries. Archaism and skeism from Pocket Fowler's modern English usage. Macaronism and amphibogolism from Garner's Dictionary of Legal Usage. Assar, a French word whose rough English equivalent is seed. Asolismo, a German word meaning topical. And isolation, a Portuguese word meaning isolate. Archaism cannot be associated with assholism. Imagine Aristotle calling some bearded Greek dude an asshole. Without a subscription to Garner's, one can only assume that macaronism does not refer to the habit of eating macaroni. We cannot be an asshole every day at the dinner table. Not amphibogolism. We cannot have a swear word that sounds so poignant. A word that means seat in English cannot refer to those sitting on it. Asolismo rhymes with Emily Marismo and cannot be so. Isolation sounds like a subtitle for the Portuguese version of the next installment in the Mission Impossible series. Mission Impossible Isolation Protocolo. 2. Wiktionary defines assholism as a tendency to display consistently antisocial behavior. Once an asshole, always an asshole. The term deserves a better definition, such as the conscious act of being more than a DICK, less than a CUNT. 3. Urban Dictionary contains a word called subtle assholism, derived from a seminal essay on linguistics, The Middle Class Renaissance, otherwise known as The Rise of Subtle Assholism. Subtle assholism is the art of being an asshole while at the same time being subtle about it. The essay contains, among other things, terms such as slackers, nonconformists, bourgeois, politics, bizarre compliments, The Simpsons, liberals, ex-girlfriend, smartass, and outright assholism, as well as quite a few grammatical mistakes. Strain 2, or the first strain. There is no sympathy in the Oxford Online Dictionary. 1. The dictionary suggests the closest results of other dictionaries, the ancient and the Fowler's pocket-rift use of modern English, macaroni and Ghanaian sexual behavior, Dictionary of Legal Usage, Assar, English, almost the same as French words asolismo, German words and isolation, Portuguese, specifying the meaning of isolated themes. It is impossible to associate ancient doctrine with alcoholism. Imagine Aristotle calling the Greek man with a beard. If you are not a member of Garner, you can assume that macaroni does not have a habit of eating macaroni. We can't hurry to the table every day. No taboos, no curses that sound violent. The English word seat cannot refer to the person sitting on it. Asolismo touches Emily Marismo, but not. Isolation looks like a Portuguese subtitle for the next movie, Mission Impossible, Missão Impossível, a separate contract. 2. Wiktionary defines alcoholism as a tendency to continuously show antisocial behavior. People who hate people tend to hate. This word requires a more appropriate definition of greater than or equal to. Attentive behavior is less than or equal to. 3. The City Dictionary has a word called delicate alcoholism. This is known as a medieval linguistic article, the Middle Renaissance, elsewhere of alcoholism. Subtle alcoholism is twitchy and hurling. This article contains terms such as lazy people, non-compliant people, bourgeois people, poetry, wacky praise, The Simpsons, liberals, ex-girlfriend, clever people, and downlight and others. Second strain. There is no sympathy in the Oxford Online Dictionary. 1. The dictionary suggests the closest result from another dictionary. ancient and Fowler's pocket lift, modern English use, macaroni and Ghanaian sexual behavior, dictionary of legal use, as SOR, English, French words, as a listener, German words, and Portuguese, isolation, almost identical to Portuguese, meaning the meaning of an independent theme. It is impossible to associate the ancient doctrine with alcoholism. Imagine Aristotle calling a Greek man with a beard. If you're not a Garner member, you're going to assume that macaroni has no habit of eating macaroni. You should not rush to the table every day. Violent sound, curse, violent sound. The English word seat cannot refer to a seated person, as Solismo touches Emily Merismo. Isolation looks like a Portuguese subtitles of the next film, Mission Impossible, Missão Impossível, separate agreement. 2. The Dictionary contains alcoholism as a tendency to consistently show antisocial behavior. People who hate people tend to hate them. This word requires a more appropriate definition of greater than or equal to. Meticulous action is less than or equal to. 3. In the City Dictionary, it is known as sensitive alcoholism. A medieval language article, Middle Renaissance, another place for alcoholism. This article contains terms such as lazy people, non-compliance people, bourgeois people, poetry, wacky compliments, Simpsons, liberals, ex-girlfriends, clever people, and passing through alcoholism and many grammatical errors. Strain 3. There is no compassion in the online Oxford Dictionary. 1. The dictionary suggests the closest result to other dictionaries, antiquity and division in modern English usage by Pocket Fowler, macaronism and gender behavior in the Ghana Dictionary of Legal Usage, sit, a French word whose English is more or less equivalent to a place. As a lismo, German word indicates the subject, and isolation, Portuguese word, which means isolated. Old age cannot be associated with alcoholism. Imagine that Aristotle calls the bearded Greeks fools. If you're not subscribed to Garner, you can only assume that macaroni is not in the habit of eating them. We can't be idiots at the table every day. No contradictions. We can't have a dirty word that sounds that loud. The word seat in English cannot designate the person sitting on it. Asolismo rhymes with Emily Merismo, but it is not. Isolation sounds like Portuguese subtitles for the upcoming movie Mission Impossible, Missão Impossível, Isolation Agreement. 2. The dictionary defines alcoholism as a tendency to systematically display antisocial behavior, once an arsehole, always an arsehole. The term should have a better definition, such as conscious behavior greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. 3. The City Dictionary contains a word called mild alcoholism, which is derived from basic linguistic article middle class rebirth, also called the rise of subtle alcoholism. Subtle alcoholism is the art of being a fool, and he's also a fool. This article includes, among other things, terms like praise, non-conforming, bourgeois, poetics, bizarre praise, The Simpsons, liberals, ex-girlfriends, intelligent and sincere people, alcoholics, and many grammatical errors. Strain 4. There is no absolute in the online Oxford Dictionary. No. This dictionary offers better results than other dictionary. Joel Fowler's Modern English using antiquity and showmanship, macaronism, and Abyssinians use Garner's Dictionary of Legal Usage. Sit is a French word equivalent to English at home. Asolismo, German, points for news, and isolation, the Portuguese word means separate. Archaeology is not related to monopoly. Imagine Aristotle calling a running Greek anchor. Without Garner's participation, one can only assume that macaroni is not a habit of eating pasta. We can't be unconscious at the table every day. Not amphibian. We can't have a word of laughter that is so interesting. A word that does not mean English place can refer to someone who's sitting there. Assalismo is a poem with Emily Merismo, and it can't be that way. The Assassin's Creed seems to be the subtitle of the Portuguese version of the Impossible Future of Mission, Copper Impossible Insulation Protocol. Wikipedia defines socialism as a tendency to show persistent, disproportionate behavior. When in asphalt, always in asphalt. The term deserves a better definition than an intentional act that is more than one letter, less than one letter. Third, Urban Dictionary vocabulary includes a word called subtle asceticism, derived from the original text of linguistics, middle class innovation, also known as sub-Aristotle's tool. Delicate subalterism, the art of the tulips, but at the same time, beautiful. The article includes terms such as lazy, strangers, bourgeois, poetry, strange definition, Simpson, key, ex-friends, absolute caution and extremism, as well as numerous grammatical errors. Strain 5. Absolutism is not found in online Oxford dictionaries. 1. The dictionary presents best results from other dictionaries. Pocket follows modern English using archaism and schism, macaronism and amphibians from the Garner Dictionary of Law Practice. Sitting, a French word that has the approximation in English at home. Assalismo, a German news word, and isolation, a Portuguese word meaning isolation. Antiquity cannot be linked to solar. Imagine Aristotle calling a bearded Greek asshole. Without Greek's contribution, one can only assume that macaroons are not a habit to eat macaroons. We cannot be half the word at the table every day, not amphibians. We cannot have a dirty word that is so moving. A word that means a place in English cannot describe those who are sitting there. Assalismo runs by Emily Merismo and cannot be so. Isolation appears to be a subtitle for the Portuguese version of Mission Impossible's next episode, Misso Impossible and Insulation Protocol. Second, Wiktionary defines sololism as a way of displaying consistent antisocial behavior. When an asshole, always an asshole, the term deserves a better explanation than the intentional act of more than one letter, less than one letter. Third, in the Urban Dictionary, there's a word called subtle assholism, derived from an original essay on linguistics, The Renaissance of the Middle Class, also known as The Rise of Subtle Assholism. Subtle subholism is the art of being an asshole, but subtle at the same time. The essay includes terms such as laziness, strangers, bourgeois, poetry, bizarre praise, The Simpsons, left, formal lover, caution, and total absolutism, as well as many grammatical errors. My last train, which is the sixth one, Oxford vocabulary online not completed. A. This dictionary offers better results than any other dictionary. Archaeologists of the Shia pocket fullers and the modern use of dictionary and the legal use of the Abyssinian corner. Ashok is a French word that is almost synonymous with English. Azalismo is the German word for stand. Loneliness is the Portuguese word for separation. This has nothing to do with archaeology. Imagine a Greek anchor with a restoration company. Without Garner's participation, one can speculate that pasta is not about pasta eating. We can't break the schedule every day. Not the Abyssinian, you don't have a lot of fun. A word that cannot be translated into English means a sitting person. Esolicimo is a poem by Emily Merismo. It cannot be. Subcommittee associations seem to be the next version of what is impossible in Portuguese. Miss Ampol's separation protocol. Wikipedia defines socialism as the need for sustainable, insecure behavior. Once asphalt, always asphalt. The term deserves better definition than a letter, and the characters are less than cognitive function. In urban linguistics, Sublinguistics is a term derived from the original text of linguistics, a medieval invention, also known as sub-esoteric rhyme. The subcommittee is art as fault, but at the same time, it is a subcommittee. This article contains terms such as lazy, foreign, bourgeois, poetic, bad commentary, Simpson, rhetoric, ex-boyfriend, proper warning and justification, and many grammatical errors. Thank you.
Our next reader is Susan Bruns-Rowe. Susan Bruns-Rowe's essays, interviews, and short stories have appeared in LitHub, Brevity, Creative Nonfiction, and elsewhere. She teaches creative writing workshops for The Cabin and the Osher Institute at Boise State University, and serves as an editor for the online magazine Literary Mama. Susan's project for the COVID Cultural Commissioning Fund is a short memoir about her relationship with her sister, who was paroled from prison in the midst of pandemic and quarantine.
The title of the piece that I'll be reading is called Disorder. I'll be reading about half of it, and I'd like to thank my sister who participated by doing a number of interviews with me. 2 months into the pandemic, my sister got paroled. She woke early one morning at the South Boise Women's Correctional Center, a group of dun-colored cinder block buildings surrounded by concertina wire and sagebrush. She wanted to be first in line to see the counselor, and she gave him her prison number. "You're getting out on the 16th, he said, looking at his computer screen. "Do you have a ride?" My sister was indignant. "Do you even know who I am?" She wasn't getting out. She'd spent the last 3 months behind bars awaiting a hearing because she'd violated her parole. Her PO was recommending revocation. The counselor looked up and met her eyes. "Yeah," he said, "you're Bennett. Do you have a ride?" It was April 2020, and the coronavirus was taking over the world. The Idaho Parole Board had opted to, quote, utilize maximum discretion for eligible inmates. My sister Ruth has been released from prison before, more than 5 times, less than 10. That's not counting the number of times she has been released from one of Idaho's jails. She is a drug addict who suffers from a mental illness that went undiagnosed for 20 years. As a young woman, she seesawed between a debilitating depression and a mania that often risked her life. That is, until she discovered drugs. Her drug of choice was heroin. Later, it was meth. She called me on a startling blue morning to tell me the news. As the rest of the world locked itself away, she had gained a shaky freedom. She was giddy with excitement, but all I could feel was dread. Each time my sister is released from prison, she envisions a bright and gleaming future, and she wants me to see it too. The last time, I managed it. I managed it for a good long while. This is a story about the last time. I met her in the parking lot of a strip mall the day after her release. Her face split into a grin. "Hi, sis." She came to the driver's side of my car and hugged me as soon as I opened the door. She had on a white coat that was 3 sizes too big. She had walked from her group home, run by an organization called SHIP. Their tagline was safe and sober housing in a therapeutic environment. She walked around the hood of my car, limping. "How's your foot?" I asked when she settled into the passenger seat. "It hurts," she said with the same grin. She was wearing a pair of slippers, which together with the baggy coat made her look like she had ventured out in her pajamas. "Where are your shoes?" "Someone stole them." "What? When?" "Dunno," she shrugged. "It happened before I got out." Near the end of her time in prison, she asked me to buy her shoes. Shoes are required to get a job in prison, and they aren't supplied. The ones available through the commissary were $40. She also wanted yarn so she could crochet. I told her I could afford to buy her one of these, but not both. She chose the shoes. The job was filling inmate requests at the commissary. She had only worked 2 days when she hurt her foot. My sister often had injuries of some kind. I felt a weight pushing against my sternum, a roiling of sorts, the caustic mix of responsibility and resentment that I have felt toward her ever since we were kids. It was hard to say what upset me more, that her shoes had been stolen, or that she didn't seem to care. I'd spent an hour online creating an account and giving my personal credit card information to the for-profit company that ran the prison commissary. The purpose of our outing today was to buy her a phone and go to lunch. Now she was talking about the discount phone store in the strip mall and the great deals they had. "I'm not ready to buy you a phone today," I said. Her face lost a little of its animation. "Okay. I'll do some research of my own, but I'm not going to buy a phone in there," I said, gesturing at the store from which she'd just emerged. "Okay," she said again. I took a deep breath and said what had been on my mind the whole morning. "I want to help you, Ruth," I said, "but if you ask me for money every time we meet, I will resent you for it, and I won't want a relationship with you." She looked at me, her brown eyes unblinking. They looked more amber than I remembered, as if their color had faded. "I understand," she said. I let out my breath. I felt like a jerk. I felt relieved. 4 years ago, my sister was camping, moving from place to place with her boyfriend in his beat-up van. One day, the van broke down on a busy street, and the police pulled up. An officer asked to look inside my sister's purse. She gave it to him. Inside, he found a rolled cigarette with marijuana. That gave him cause to look inside the van. There he found a meth pipe. "Whose is this?" the policeman asked. My sister looked at her boyfriend. He looked back at her. They'd both smoked the pipe. Neither remembered what money bought the drugs. They shared what little they had. "Mine," my sister said. The judge gave her 2 years fixed, 5 indeterminate, the maximum sentence. She served her time in a mishmash of county jails, waiting for a place in prison. Idaho's prisons are so overcrowded, the state pays its counties to house its inmates. In Adams County, she said the food was delicious, made by a local woman. I called a deputy there to get permission to send her yarn for her birthday. "What about crochet needles?" I asked. "As long as they're plastic," he said. Then she got transferred to Gem County. The food was not as good, the deputies not as nice. I sent her a card and put my first initial and last name along with the return address. They sent it back. A stamp across the canary yellow envelope indicated my full name was required. I asked Ruth where she wanted to go for lunch. McDonald's. I've been hankering for a Big Mac for 2 years. We found a table away from the families with kids. Nearby, an employee dragged a mop. My sister said there was a group of church ladies who had agreed to help her with transportation. One of them picked her up from prison. Another took her to sign her up for food stamps. It was a long wait, nearly 3 hours, but the church lady, Cindy, didn't complain. She had a brand new SUV, Ruth said, dipping a French fry in a tiny paper cup filled with ketchup, but she'd never programmed the GPS. "Oh?" I examined my breakfast sandwich before taking a bite. Ruth took a few bites of her Big Mac. She had to eat slowly. She had dentures on top, but none on the bottom. Her lower jaw was worn away from methamphetamine use. I programmed it for her. It only took a minute. She said she never would have figured it out. Ruth smiled. My heart defrosted a bit. My sister had tried to repay this woman's kindness. "That's awesome. Do you think she'll remember how to do it?" "No way," she laughed. I laughed too. My sister could be funny and kind. I asked where she planned to look for a job. "Here? McDonald's?" "No," she shook her head. "Why not?" She had worked at McDonald's in her past lives. "I want to get my CNA license," she said, "work in a nursing home. The pay is a lot better and so are the hours." I thought the odds were against a drug felon getting a job in a nursing home, but I had already squashed her hopes of getting a phone that day, so I asked instead about the women where she was staying. She described her roommate, the house mother, some of the other girls. I knew even the subsidized rent was more than my sister could hope to make working a minimum wage job. Plus, she had her cost of supervision. The state's charged for a parole officer to keep tabs on her. She had stopped eating her hamburger. "Aren't you going to finish?" "Nah, I'm full." I could tell she was ready to go. We'd been at McDonald's for over an hour. I'll get you a prepaid phone this week, I told her. That'd be great, she said. Thank you. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making small parallelograms of pale green and soft yellow on the newly mopped floor. I took another sip of coffee. I felt reluctant to stand. My sister is indigent. She's always had difficulty holding a job and holding on to money. Many years ago, she forged our parents' checks and was charged with a felony. When I was in college, she forged my checks too. Another time, she stole money from a discount store where she worked as a cashier. She is also indigent because with each incarceration, she loses all her possessions. For a while, our widowed mother stored some of her things, but that became increasingly difficult as time went on. Sometimes my sister's friends promised to keep her stuff until she got out, but sometimes the friend went to prison too, or moved away, or died. Then there's this. People have the mistaken belief prison is free, but there are charges for everything. Shoes, for instance, for phone calls, emails, and text, even for shampoo and deodorant. Inmates are not given items for basic hygiene until 30 days have passed. My sister once asked me to give her money so she could buy deodorant so the other inmates wouldn't shun her. All money is channeled through a private corporation, which claims a fee. The only thing my sister has going for her is her resourcefulness. She knows the system. She's been in it nearly all of her adult life. Ruth and I continued to meet for lunch every few weeks. She asked me to take her to a superstore where she had a voucher to buy clothes. By then it was January. She'd been out of prison 4 months. The ritual of women shopping together, perhaps especially true of sisters, we never had. Beginning when I was a teenager, I went out of my way to avoid spending time with Ruth. I hated how she stole and lied and constantly ran away. She hated that I was a goody two-shoes, always ready to report her and stop her fun. Our relationship was fraught with extremes of love and hate. At the superstore, I had to jigger hangers to get clothes out of the packed racks. I wrestled out a few random tops and held them up for Ruth to see. When we had a pile of sweaters and blouses draped across our arms, we found ourselves beside the skinny jeans. They won't have my size, Ruth said, but I had already found it. Just try them on, I coaxed. It only takes a second. I stood outside the dressing room to give her plenty of space. Thankfully, we had the place to ourselves and no sales clerk hovered. Fluorescent lights cast the carpet and walls in an unbecoming yellow. After a few minutes, Ruth stepped out to show me. Her eyes avoided the mirror. She had on a soft pink chenille sweater, which looked lovely against her skin. Dark denim jeans hugged her slim thighs and calves. You look amazing, I said. I'd only ever seen her in faded t-shirts and jeans, or else the heavy cotton of prison garb. I could tell she wasn't used to the feel of new clothes because she walked stiffly. Really? She asked, skeptical. She wouldn't allow herself to believe it. Her hands, nervous, smoothed down the sweater. Okay, she said after a moment. I'll get it. She chose 2 outfits that night, the pink chenille sweater and jeans and a second pair of jeans with a peasant-style blouse. We put these in the shopping cart, and then Ruth said she wanted to check out the shoes. In the shoe department, she made a beeline toward a pair of knee-high boots in brown suede with wedge heels. I pointed out the impracticality of suede in Idaho winters. I noted, too, the precarious heel. But even as I said these things, she zipped them on and ran her hand lovingly along the suede. She laughed. I'm going to get these, too, she said, cramming the boots back into their box. I added up the amounts on the price tags, minus the posted discounts, to make sure she had enough. Then I wandered around the store while Ruth went to customer service. When I got back, the transaction was complete. The outfits and boots were bagged. The sales clerk handed Ruth her packages with a smile. Outside, darkness had settled over the parking lot. The night was quiet, peaceful, and bitterly cold. We climbed inside my car, and I turned up the heater. I couldn't believe how smoothly the whole outing had gone. I couldn't believe how much I'd enjoyed it. It was only a short drive back to Ruth's group home. She told me the CNA job hadn't panned out. She'd applied at McDonald's after all and was working the cash register there. Her big news, though, was that she got a second job at another ship house as a house mother. It meant she had to move, but from now on her rent would be free. "I'm proud of you," I told her. "I'm proud of me too," she said. "I've never done this well before." The winter night was freezing, but we were cocooned inside the car. As I turned onto her street, I glanced up at the stars. Thousands of pinpricks of light, piercing a vast darkness. Thank you.
Lindsay Appel is a writer from Montana and a recent graduate from Boise State University's Creative Writing MFA program. Her CCC Fund project is a post-apocalyptic fantasy novel that explores themes of trauma and found family, based in part on the collaborative storytelling and tabletop role play that helped her own found family cope during the pandemic.
Unless you're one of the lucky few groups able to earn their living making real play web series and podcasts, most tabletop role-playing campaigns only last a handful of months, if that. Some are pre-written and designed this way, with players able to complete the story arc within a set number of game sessions. Many players prefer one-shots, single-session games with a clear objective that can be met within a few hours. I had only played a handful of TTRPG sessions, none of them expanding to a full-blown campaign, when I started playing in the campaign that would become the novel tentatively titled Void and Rail. That was nearly 3 years ago, and the story continues even now. The bonds forged at and expanded beyond the tabletop have been a lifeline during the COVID-19 pandemic. Beyond the sense of community and family maintained by continuing to play via video conferencing software, the themes we explore in our campaign suddenly feel very timely as our characters band together in the face of a seemingly apocalyptic circumstance, working to turn the tide of an ever-encroaching void. I'm going to read 2 short poems from my process notebook and a selection from the first chapter of Void and Rail. Fire season, breath. Phalaenopsis, the moth orchid, blooms in winter. But mine dropped his petals and waited 2 years to throw his blossom arms into the air to drink the smoke-choked summer, as if he knew perhaps this might be his last opportunity to feel the gasp of CO2 delighted light upon his waxy green, or a mist, cool and trembling with vibrato of human voice. This is not a metaphor, you see. I have forgotten how to write poetry. Conceptual. If art was honest, this project would be 1,000 blank pages. But art is a gentle deception, and so I will tell you a story. It begins with a girl who wanted magic so desperately to be real. She cut out her heart and replaced it with a jar of river water, a fingerling trout within, circling around a smooth agate wish forever until it died in isolation. This too is not a metaphor. Prologue, Gwithin. The song renders time meaningless, but not with the same sleepy, weaving curiosity of the other lands. Even in the darkest dealings of my mother's court, or the creeping horrors of a hag's lair, seem lucid and warm compared to the twangling cacophony that pursues me. And the rail cuts through like a blade, leaving a silence in its wake almost as harrowing as the song itself. How long did I run? And how long have I slumbered? Oak was familiar, and so to oak I bound myself. The song faded, and I waited. The music that awakened me was not of the void, but the bittersweetness of mortal anguish, traveling the long diluted streams of fey blood. Once I would have gladly fed upon your pain as I pulled you down the ever-darkening paths of the unseelie wilds, and you would have danced to my tune gladly till your body gave way. Was it the void song that wore away the edges as it consumed my physical form? Was the traitor prince devoured? And what remains? Chapter 1. Silme Maddox had a theory that the best allies could be found in bars, brothels, and in jail. And when you're after a freelance job with the proprietus of Gateway's most luxurious parlor house, well, you can't hurt to peruse the clientele alongside the workers, especially when that job is taking you straight out of a stable shard and into the void. "A drink, Nem?" he asked, turning from scanning the room to face the group assembled at the table. The boy, if that's what you'd call him, Max could never quite figure out whether the lad was 15 years old or 1500, stared blankly in that way he had that was somehow accusatory in its disinterest. "That's a no, then." The others were already arguing logistics, something Max was all too happy to avoid, and as his attention began to wander yet again, the gnome perched on the edge of the table piped up. "Why don't you go see if that cute deep elf at the bar will comp us a bottle of champagne?" Coraloo asked as she tuned the lute resting in her lap. "Which one?" came Nemzaya's calm voice. Now that was an intriguing question. Max looked toward the bar, immediately spotting the sweet-faced elven barmaid with whom he'd struck up a mild flirtation the last time the group had passed through. Her fair hair looked almost pink, and the gold-flecked freckles on her lapis-hued skin sparkled under the glow of the red neon display above the bar. A spell-tech projection of the words, "The Maiden's Minotaur," also depicting the outline of a buxom human figure and a minotaur in a variety of interesting positions. The other deep elf he nearly missed. Seated a good 7 chairs away from the nearest fellow customer, sat a figure dressed in a tattered leather duster covered in colorful patches and stains of indeterminate origin. Her black hair was streaked through here and there with the same white as Max's, and her skin was a pale amethyst color that suggested their shared chthonic fae ancestry. A fog of gloom seemed to hummer in the air around her, and Max felt the sudden urge to turn and walk the other way. "Fascinating," a voice whispered in his ear, making Max jump just ever so slightly. Surely not noticeable, the embodiment of cool Silme Maddox. He wasn't quite used to the messenger tattoos yet, and Tokrath's voice, however filled with grandfatherly warmth, still had that subtle growl that accompanied most Dragonian vocalizations. Max glanced back at the table, where the mage sat pretending to examine his red wine, a clawed hand resting on the side of his neck. It seems to be some sort of subtle fear illusion, not intended to terrify, but certainly to keep others at bay. Do be careful with this one, Mr. Maddox. What Max lacked in arcane knowledge, he made up for in instincts, or so he insisted whenever Tokrath told him not to do something, which was often. Shaking off the effects of the subtle spell, he paused, adjusted his top hat, and approached. The woman didn't seem to notice him as she threw back the remnants of a pink cocktail and said, seemingly to no one, "Nobody asked you, Greg." Was this a drow cultural thing? Max couldn't remember, which bothered him because something at the back of his mind told him he should remember. "Yeah, Greg," he said, emptying his empty whiskey glass down on the bar and giving her a knowing look. "I hate it when me booze talks back too." She looked at him with a somewhat horrified expression. "Not a cultural thing, then. Plan B. Buy you another there?" She passed, her gaze flickering momentarily below his eyes. Must be the mustache, Max thought, thumbing the enchanted locket hanging below his bow tie. Ladies are powerless against the mustache. "Rude," she said. She clapped her hand to her mouth as though she had not meant to speak. "No rudeness intended, madam," Max said, bowing deeply. "Trust in the mustache," he thought. "Allow me to introduce myself." He almost seemed sincere, which Lenore thought was the strangest thing about this interaction. That and the facial hair. It was rare to see a drow who could grow facial hair at all, much less whatever that was. "Sorry, I was talking to a fella I met in the market that's been pestering me all night." She tapped her head as if to say, telepathy, arcane stuff. That is not how communication spells work, but he looks like he doesn't know enough about magic to argue. She smiled, ignoring the commentary that echoed in her mind, emanating from a warm space at the center of her chest. A drink would be lovely. "What are you drinking?" the man asked as he motioned the waitress over to the end of the bar. "Gin and cherry glacé." Max paused mid-drink order, giving Lenore a long look before breaking into a wide smile. His violet eyes practically sparkled, and she felt her cheeks grow flushed, more flushed, that is, not the booze-induced kind. Make it 2 of what she's having, he amended. Woman after me own heart. He fished about in the pockets of his suit jacket, which appeared to be reinforced beneath with dark, well-worn leather. Lenore caught a glimpse of a bandolier of throwing knives as he searched. So not your standard barfly creep, an armed barfly creep. Glacé is handy for staying sane after a little run around in the void, don't get me wrong, but less so for having a good time. Aha! He held up a small vial of a deep orange liquid. Again, a whisper of a thought not her own. Armed with flame drop. That'll get us good and toasted. I am not going to let myself be drugged for your entertainment, Lenore hissed. And Max looked genuinely offended. We really need to work on the responding out loud thing, Princess. We aren't a solo act anymore. I would never, Max began. Lenore opened her mouth to protest, but he continued. Do you have any idea what this cost? If you think I'm sharing, you're nuttier than little Lou back there. He gestured to the table behind him, where 3 people appeared deep in conversation. A very small individual with a shock of turquoise hair shouted, without looking up from the document spread on the table before her, We can hear you, Max. He chuckled, rubbing the side of his neck, where Lenore noted a small, triangular sigil of some sort. When the barmaid returned with their drinks, Max uncorked the vial of flame drop and casually emptied the contents into his glass. Now, there is one sort of folk I will share with, he said, raising his glass, and that's mates and comrades. That's 2 sorts of folk, said Lenore, swallowing the entirety of her cocktail in one long drink. And I ain't neither. Yet. Interlude. Elves and the Fae, a pamphlet, by Kraay, investigative journalist, freelance welder, and supreme sage of the Fire Shrine, 3 years running. They would have you think that pre-void history is something lost and faded in all memory, but that can only be true if the original supposition is also true. The void is real. No, history marches forward unbroken, and if you could only listen past the radio waves that paralyze your faculties, you'd know this. And this we know, that long before the illusion of the void and long before folk inhabited the mundane realm, the Fae existed on many axes of affiliation. Only a fool sees the day and the night and thinks, ah, yes, good and evil, as though it would be a good thing to burn eternally in the midday sun. The bright and shiny ones always want you to think they're pure and good, until they throw you in the back of an unmarked steam carriage and take you to have a spell tech chip implanted in your head. So the shiny Seelie court held space for the Ether Fae, should they choose to appear. The high elves of sun and moon were known once to claim this ancestry of proof ruling the skies over all our heads. The Unseelie court maintained distant but friendly relations to the chthonic Fae, rulers of the underground world, of all that is necessary in death so that life may flourish, of the deep and unknown things. The deep elves descend from these Fae folk, and just as the illusion of supremacy continues to poison high elf relations with the rest of elvenkind, surfacer perception of living in the deep and associating with the crawling creatures of the earth has led to a number of less than flattering narratives about drow culture. Folk, elven or not, fear what we can neither perceive nor understand. It is irrational to trust the fear of others as proof of another's guilt or moral quality, unless it's fear of gnomes, which is nearly always justified. Unlike gnomes, whose origins remain shrouded in sinister mystery, sea elf and sylvan elf cultures can trace their lineage to the more ever-present elementals of the courts. The clockwork elves were said to have either been wiped out or returned to the other lands when the void came. But since the void does not really exist, their whereabouts remain suspect. I theorize the gnomes had something to do with their disappearance, but as of yet lack sufficient evidence to support this claim. There are rumors of other chthonic Fae-descended elves beside the drow, some of whom have innate mind-controlling and destroying power greater than even the most practiced mage. There are further unsubstantiated rumors about tentacles. Any information you could provide would greatly assist in my search for the truth. Please use the dead drop labeled Elves on Freehold, Sam's Tavern. Please leave spell tech tips in the dead drop labeled Winter. One last note of dire import. Sea elves make manatee butter. Suspicious? Yes, but shockingly palatable. Perfect with oysters. Thank you.
Our next reader is Katie Fuller. Katie Fuller is a poet from Maine and the author of 2 chapbooks, Valve and the Greenwood Cemetery. She teaches or has taught writing at Boise State University, College of Idaho, and the Cabins Writers in the Schools program. Her CCC project, Living Will, includes epistolary poems to loved ones near and far. Her manuscript, Careful, about growing up by paper mill, was a finalist for Autumn House Press's full-length prize this year. New poems are forthcoming in the journal Bone Bouquet.
This morning in a message to Quinn, things that intrude the silence linked to productivity. A car alarm, a leaf blower, these little inconsistencies we attend to for a sense of usefulness. I still say you are enough. Just as you are, you are. Reminiscence, sitting on the steps of that church when the eclipse happened and light saturation maxed out all objects flat on the screen of our eyes. Perception is a fickle love, as is autonomy. Cruelty the stroke of a pen enacting systems designed to create the illusion your perception of a self isn't autonomous. Denying the change from F to M on a birth certificate, for example, relies on the same cruel logic that keeps us inside right now. Science is, we say, a heartbeat is, you are what you are. What is the premium of a life? Science alone won't do it, says a man I've learned to call father. Science tells me what I've just experienced is an earthquake. I already knew this before science. Discuss an exit strategy with family. Whether or not to procure a gun, how the shotgun shells he ordered come from a town with 6 cases of this new disease, rendering bullets' lethal nature in a new light. Yesterday, a friend asked me if I could change one thing right now, not related to the virus, what would it be? I'm tempted to say I'd change nothing, afraid to acknowledge a wished change would be to acknowledge how unlikely that change might be. Change is inevitable. Each breath I take is different than before. Right now, the cherry blossom across the street glows pink against the sky. Only when I approach it closely do I see its plainer whiteness. Even colors need each other. If I could be able to do one thing for the rest of time, it would be to make you laugh. Making you laugh would be my superpower. All the things you wait for in cycles. You wait for the leaves to come in, the shedding of a wall that grows inside you, an old lover's text. Things find their rhythms. The songbird needs a song. The car leaks oil and time. You put kitty litter down to soak up the stains. You learn to fall in love with walls. Letter to E. I'm positive neither of us dreamt we'd be writing in such incredible circumstances, and to think, even just a month ago, even at the end of a world, desire, dreams, I think we will come to communicate in fragments as necessity. I read we are just a drop in the ocean, yet on the other end of new pandemia, I long for a walk with my father in an old growth forest neither of us will have seen before, another version of heaven. Sometimes I wonder if heaven is the simplest way humans make sense of radical transformation. When a thing ceases to be what it was, it ascends, we say. But if you want heaven, look down. Look at the world teeming with life at your feet. Could ascension start with a downward path? What if the world gets tipped right over and the path to heaven is sideways? I pay so much attention to the animals now. I walk around and count the cats as tiny deities. A motley ensemble of squirrels and robins play each morning through the window. One crow drinks from the puddle left behind by the rain. At night, I dream the banks of the Androscoggin back home are rising. A room made fully of glass, myself inside with children. A stone cliff to climb like a path of least resistance, a path of least suffering. Least of all of it. My heart aches for the quietness of night. The neighbors decide to put their Valentine's decorations back up. I put a record on and let the needle fall. I wish for my sister all the PPE she'll need to survive in her hospital. I still have faith in imagining. In the bath, lilacs floating, quartz-like holograms. Me singing at the top of my lungs. Description as a semblance of control in dreams where none exists. I think they call them poems. A place I am awake, and thankfully so. The song alone keeps going. This next section is excerpts from a letter to E from a letter written May 27th to June 8th of this summer. I keep a list of things I want to put in this letter. How all the birds are either crows or blackbirds, how not a lot of people are wearing masks, how hard it is to concentrate in the midst of ambient sadness from which we all move now. I write the phrase errant poppies over and over again. I love the idea of being errant, of being wrong and wild. I admit to Katie I cry every day. Lately I've been waking up crying, a kind of absolution in the morning. I resist the urge to classify the tears into an either-or happy-sad dichotomy. They just are what they are. Emotion before value, involuntary. I can remember learning the phrase involuntary and its opposite for the first time in school, studying human muscles. I was captivated, as though it had never occurred to me that some things occur without volition, that some things aren't products of sheer will alone. I think I understood relief in rhythms and motions beyond our control, as though up until then I felt solely responsible for everything involving my body, and someone was saying to me, "Rest easy, Katie, the heart's an involuntary muscle." A ballet dancer in the city will take requested songs and set them to beautiful movements. His theater's gone dark. During yesterday's conference call, I am keenly aware he and I are moving around a lot in our virtual little boxes. He says very naturally and sincerely to everyone that it's been hard. Having heard of his idea to dance for us, I realize there's a poem I've written before all of this in which the same dancer appears. And I recall the moment when, after singing in front of a crowd, he told me good job and that the song he sang was really fucked up, which I interpret to mean he heard the words and thought about them. In that moment, I felt seen. He doesn't know this yet, but I think about sending him that song and the poem for him to dance to. I think of another melody sung by Dolores O'Riordan, who died just before all of this, who was only 46, and it's a song I put on and cry to, and when I cry, it feels good and exhausting. I want to give this song to the dancer also. Too many songs. It's not that I want the dancing to quell or replace the crying. Of the crying, I am not ashamed. It's that I want the tears to take on a different form, a new shape. I want the tears to be a generative physical form. They are unwilled, the way good dancing feels when you're doing it right. I don't know what song to send him, but I have faith the choice will become clear. Maybe even, like the simpler motions of late, an involuntary one. Truth is, there's part of me that wants to sustain it, this crying each day. Like if it stops, it'll be another thing to miss. Once I told a friend a line came into my head for a poem, and in the same 5 minutes, I'd already forgotten it. We were sitting at Harry's in the North End before all of this, and he said, "Don't worry, there will always be more poems." And he was right. There will always be more poems, there will always be more tears. But don't mistake me now. I'm not trying to glamorize suffering or revel in real crises of mental health. I'm simply writing as a way to stay alive. It can be that simple. Silence equals death. In this letter, I want to tell you that I have fantasies about the things we could learn to do at the ocean. We would learn to surf, to sail. I can fantasize these things while at the same time knowing that access even to our ocean is a privilege dictated by class, by race, and a whole host of inequities. This time for me to cry is a privilege. I should try and control my tears in the face of them. I do try. I place a cold cloth on my face like my mother taught me. Tears get weaponized. The tears of white women, aka the tears of my body, especially so. Weapons stem from the language of fighting. They tell us to fight, and then they tell us that which you push against pushes back harder, which makes fighting feel less like fighting and more like a case for peaceful inertia or radical acceptance of the thing you're pushing against. But what am I meant to accept today? That in this week, 100,000 people will have died in this new reality? Or that George Floyd didn't get the chance to breathe? Fuck that. I want to be very clear here. George Floyd got murdered. The police murdered George Floyd. I accept that. I need to scream that one loud to people in my life who won't hear it like a scream, who won't know that name, or if they do, encounter it as another headline that doesn't pierce the wall of a lived reality, information that doesn't appear to live in them the way a virus can. How loud can I scream? When does screaming have more agency than crying? I watched the movie Masculine Feminine and had this realization, I'm a bit like Paul, not Madeline, and a kind of insufferable or desperate notion of not wanting to be alone. And yet here I am alone. 2 bits of dialogue from that movie that I think will sweep you off your feet. Madeline says, love in the heart of man is solitude, and your face thrown back over the brow of my female nakedness, and my love is in the sea, in dreams, and here we are against death. So I should credit Godard. And then in another scene, where the group of young characters the movie centers around, and we are still young, as you say, and I hope we are, the character Paul thinks this, quote, "It wasn't the movie of our dreams. It wasn't the total film we carried inside ourselves. The film we would have liked to make, or more secretly, no doubt, the film we wanted to live. We must take it, this film, for each other, our future, ourselves, and for any meaningful new world-y. I think we will cease to be human if we don't make this film. I have to believe we can. Love always, your little bird. P.S. The wall hanging of the seashells you sent me shall go over my child's bed so that their dreams will always be of the sea." This poem is called 13 Notes on Survival. 1. Say hello from a bed where I'm no princess, littered with clipped coupons. I'm loitering here, I'm loving it too. I've got a desire as real as a barren tree's to grow until it's over, and a desire to know, what were the oak's natural causes when my father took the chainsaw in his hands? Today I wake up with a sense of dying in the air, which is always there, atmospherically. I send my father stories about ancient trees and the sorrow surrounding their felling, what woodsmen call a harvest. To reap is an old-timey term, to sow is also. Now that I live alone, I crawl naked across the floor to retrieve my books so that the neighbors don't see me through the picture window. An attempt to reverse the script. Lay the beans out on the counter. Can I be him if I'm the one who makes sure I eat? Or wakes at the shuffle in the middle of the night, light switched on, mace at my side? When hunting, one is to rid themselves of scent. No relative odor left behind. Clothes washed in deer piss. My niece conceived in the rut becomes another mythical cog we'll rely on asserting our nature. When a human gets next to me, I sometimes feel a field around me being punctured. No longer having my back against the wall. Can't drive the deer when my body feels called out, or the smell of your soap so close to me. Threat, 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 threat is what the doe must think upon an unfamiliar shuffle. How unfair that I take this sensation for granted, as though I am owed, worse, entitled to silence. When a man I interact with sends written vitriol to the women I interact with, my ability to imagine a worst-case scenario isn't gender-based fear, says the shrink. It's high-level threat assessment. I can still die even though fearless, and dying's not the job I get paid for, nor is thinking like the hunter. Fruitless years I've already spent figuring out how to be human, when intimacy's simple. I get off my bike to chase the rabbit and startle the couple that walks in the dark. They tell me just move back and closer to us. But these fawny appendages already look sun-kissed in the month of love. These fawny appendages get me where I'm going. Tonight, walking, I ask a friend not to let me forget the vision I have for the barbed wire fence, mistaking it for what it isn't, something through which an animal might jump with ease and freely. One final warning before sleep. Sometimes worlds form in parking lots. The way settling down is another way of saying, child, be careful in these woods. Be so unafraid. What am I learning? The sky feels lost. The house feels lost. The country is burning. Pandemic inconsequential to this. I read Audre Lorde's Power. The cat's eyes sluggish. The air is still. The work of outsiders on the inside. The work of insiders on the outside. My dear friend Julie in her house in downtown Minneapolis mourns the children's creations. A mural in a studio whose facade resembles a business. Brush strokes up in flames. Questions igniting a pyre. How much does a home resemble a home? How much does a home resemble a business? How much does a human resemble a home, resemble a human, resemble a business? When the air's entry fee's too high, a trap for the living, the color of death, a unity no one escapes. This last poem is called Kate's Birthday, 6/8. This dumb dream of a country fails marvelously, combusts like the unclean drip pan. I sing, old England is dying, New England is dead, tree roots shoot down to the ground, a world, the map of leaf veins, boundaries, understudies, ripped up and spread. We can't even distinguish weeds from seeds in our desire for the absolute, what willing us destroyed, what willing us left. The tree at the old house is growing back. With eyes dried out from weather and tears, I must teach myself to listen, God. What this is, I must hear it. Thank you.
Our last reader is Jodine Revere. Jodine Revere is a recovering yoga teacher, actor, writer, and Thai massage therapist. She has worked with BCT, Alley, Migration Theory, Homegrown, Campfire, and Opal Theater Companies. She was poised to debut her one-woman show, The Persistent Guest, in March at BCT before the world closed. Her personal essay, Groundhog Day 2020, is a snapshot of the early days of quarantine. She is deeply grateful to the CCC for helping keep her fed during this time. We're not talking about the state of the world in large empty theaters. She can be found giving masked massages in a rented basement.
Groundhog Day 2020. Day 15, the salad days. The house is quiet in the soft morning light that stripes through the blinds. Beyond quiet, it's still. A cool breeze through the open window. My eyes flicker open, taking in the Parisian blue walls of my bedroom. My raccoon-sized ginger cat, Julian, is standing on my chest, compressing my sternum with a weight that is oddly comforting and just shy of alarming. His particular hues of marmalade solids and stripes are so aesthetically pleasing against the blue of the walls. Oof. He telepathically demands breakfast with his slitty little jade green eyes, accompanied by a Morse code of purrs so that there's no mistaking his intent. I like to imagine that he's fond of me for reasons other than being in charge of the food supply. I smile, I stretch, I run my hand over his voluminous fur body. I am first and foremost a sensualist, all things sensory. I take a deep, luxuriant inhale and exhale, and I remember that I am on sabbatical for an undetermined amount of time, and I'm okay with that. Going through cancer treatment twice is a great training ground for COVID lockdown. Stay home, be still, and rest. No problem. And bonus, I get to do it without being bald, toxic, exhausted, and food tasting metallic. I throw the comforter off, rise, and my morning dance begins. Robe, kettle on, cats fed, all windows open, incense burned, water boiled, coffee made. I move outside, coffee in hand, and slip into my hot tub. I know. I've lived in this house for 7 years, and every morning the first thing I do after making coffee is go outside. Year round. I never miss a morning. Breathe fresh air, take a pulse on the season, immerse myself in the real, actual, physical world before being engulfed in the diversionary modern living smokescreen of doing, achieving, consuming, and branding. I give thanks aloud for my wondrous landlord, praying may I never have to leave the Shangri-La. And I repeat this ritual too every single morning. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I give extra thanks to be able to shelter in place here. I say a prayer for my friends who live in New York City who haven't left their apartments at all. Taking a walk is an impossibility. After my soak, I get dressed and step out into the silent streets. It's somewhere between 7 and 7:30 a.m. At various times in my life, I have made a sporadic, half-assed morning ritual that included meditation or yoga or writing morning pages, and now it is solely my morning miles. It is preternaturally still outside, the same hushed quiet that accompanies an eclipse, a breath holding. No cars, no planes, no people, only birds. And with no other noise pollution, you can hear the individual calls. It's a symphony, punctuated with resonant, sustained silences. I love this. I don't love the why, but I love this pause. I have no job, nowhere to go or be. I start exploring trails and places I would never bother with when I was merely trying to get in a 30-minute walk before other important things. Now the walking, running is the most important thing. It's the non-negotiable 90 minutes on my to-do list every day. I found a repertoire of routes that I'm now familiar with. I switch it up daily. I don't bring a phone. I do not wear a watch. The movement of the sun, my real-time analog clock. You can hear the ticking. Everywhere I look is too much exuberant beauty. It's almost painful to take it all in. Is it always this lush, this overwhelming? Or does the absence of people pulling focus allow the volume to be turned up that much more? It's like walking through a deserted studio lot meant to look like a neighborhood. Crocus, tulips, hyacinth, daffodils will eventually give way to cherry, pear, and apple blossoms. And then the snowstorms of magnolia and dogwood. I am drunk on the fragrant air. I walk and walk and walk. I make my way home to my books, my writing, my garden, my contemplation. 5 o'clock is happy hour. I cook a delicious, thoughtful meal that I share with my daughter and roommate, my sheltering pod. I might watch some marvelous series in the evening. The Great, Mrs. America, Pen 15, Mrs. Fletcher, The Eddie, Dave, Crashing. I Love Dick. That's a show. I go to bed early and sleep well. I rest. I keep myself and others safe. I am patient and gather myself up for a long haul. I can do this. Groundhog Day number 108. After all, tomorrow is another day, and now that's starting to sound like a threat. The house is quiet in the soft morning light that stripes through the blinds. My eyes flicker open, still loving the blue walls. Giant ginger cat standing on chest. He wants food. I'll pretend he loves me. I smile. I stretch. I take a deep, satisfying inhale, and on the exhale, my heart seizes up, and I think, dear God, what noxious fuse did he who must not be named light while I slept? What new virulent derisive fire is burning because of him and his soulless little shark-eyed minions? I've been asleep for 7 hours. A lot of damage can be done in 7 hours. And don't forget, we're also in a pandemic, right? A wave of nauseating unease requires several more steady breaths to quell the sickness. And here we go. Rise, robe, kettle on, cats fed, windows open, incense burned, but there's not enough sage in all of Idaho to cleanse this mess. Coffee made, go outside, soak, give thanks for the safe space, go inside, put on clothes, out the door, into the morning, my morning miles. At first I feel like I'm fleeing. My pace quick, just short of a jog, trying to outrun, well, everything. My brain firing and flashing a roundup of all of the horrors committed on this planet from the beginning of time, moving into a brief high-speed flashcard assault of this country's history, and more specifically the last 4 years, the last 4 months, the last 2 weeks, the last 24 hours, and I shake my head and make some sort of guttural animal sound like, "Ah!" I lumber down the sidewalk, ugly mouth breathing. And I keep moving, weaving and dodging. I am Teflon. No what if fear barnacles can stick to me. And half a mile in, I jump cut out of the global pandemic IMAX disaster extravaganza in my head and into a cool indie film that takes place at a Wes Anderson cocktail party at some spectacular home in the Hollywood Hills, starring me. All my faults and bad judgments and everyone I've ever known. All the guests aggressively drunk and contentious, myself painfully sober, as I inch and elbow my way through the crowd of unruly woes. Excuse me, pardon me. I'm sorry, who are you? Can I get back to you on that? Wow, no, I sure don't remember that. Yikes, yeah, actually, do remember that. Wow, well, Jesus, what are you doing here? Never thought I'd see you again. I smile, I nod, I acknowledge. My sweat smells like shame and fear and regret. The people I love and care for the most recoil from me and turn their backs. The long gone, long expired friendships and relationships dog me like a pack of hyenas. As I run the last of this psychological gauntlet, I burst through the French doors and out onto the deck, gasping for air, and take in the rarefied view. The world below me burns, and behind me, the internal psyche trash fire burns behind me. Engulfed in flames, am I? Again, I aggressively shake my head, expel yet another variant of anxious animal sound, and clear my vision of this shitty movie. The flapping, clicking sound as the final reel plays itself out. The film bubbles and melts, and the screen goes white. I deepen, control my breath, heavy on the exhale, scanning my actual external surroundings. My neighborhood between March and June is a riot of color, sound, and scent. Lifetimes elapse in 3 months. In spite of the endless lies, the deaths, the violence, the mess, the hatred, the incompetence, and the virus. The world turns, the plants grow, the seasons change. And in spite of us and the damage that only humans can inflict, there is life and growth. Everywhere I look, there is still such exuberant beauty, it's almost painful to take it in. The brazen drunkenness, the shameless redolence of lilacs. I mean, how dare they? And thank God they only bloom for 3 weeks a year. We would all like swoon ourselves into a rapture. But then, wait for it, peonies. Damn them! Abundance after abundance after abundance. I stay alert for other walkers and runners that in the early days were non-existent. Now they're more plentiful, but still few and far between. The polite games of chicken, crossing to the other side of the road or the trail for each other to pass, now that we are all potentially rogue Death Stars. Frequently, I step aside for an unwavering, unsmiling, unmasked person who never slows for an instant as they take up their rightful space. You know, business as usual. I do not bring a phone. I do not wear a watch. I can hear the ticking. It's loud, the ticking. It's begging us to listen to it. Chalk drawings cover all the sidewalks, games of hopscotch and hearts and flowers and urgings of have a good day. We can do hard things. You are loved. We will get through this. Black lives matter. Be safe. My heart unclenches these words of encouragement, love, and human decency. Every lawn immaculate. Never has home care been such a priority. New fences, paint jobs, raised beds, constructed gardens, planted, hammocks assembled, and puppies. Oh my God, so many puppies. Also, the entire city is pretty much an open container zone for alcoholic beverages around the clock, which is kind of cool. I settle into the rhythmic cadence of swimming through instead of running from or hurrying back to what? There's nowhere to go back to. That bridge has been blown up. We're frozen mid-stride over the threshold of liminal space, stepping out of the past, but we haven't yet touched down into a future. That future doesn't exist yet. And we get to utilize this great pause to carefully decide what sort of future we're building. I mentally sift through the ashes of the dueling fires that flared up as I walked out of my house and find what I can use to frame something fresh and powerful and what needs to be left alone to burn itself out. The 2020 hindsight to help us inform the future. I am a walking gratitude meditation. One step at a time, and now, and now, and now, no more, no more, no more. The heaviness and fog lift from my heart and head as I move, as the day unfolds around me, as I humbly drink in the privilege of this being my full-time job for now. And how can I use what arises from this time to affect change, to assist, to make a contribution, to change what I refuse to accept? And there is so much I absolutely will not accept any longer. I make my way home to my books, my contemplation, my podcasts, my great unlearning of so much misinformation. And this is a full-time job. And even as some have returned to work or can work remotely, I'm an actor and a massage therapist, and it is unsafe, impractical, and impossible for me to do my job. Theaters are shuttered, filming halted. I used to do body work out of my house, so no way on that. I'm completely self-employed. I never received unemployment benefits, but thanks to the CCC Arts Grant and Rebound Idaho, by living very simply, I can make it to October. And then I have no idea what I'll do. But I am very lucky, and I will continue to unwaveringly do what I can to keep myself and others safe. It is not business as usual. Happy hour now sometimes starts at 4. I can no longer watch any movies or series besides Queer Eye. I can't bear to be subjected to anything other than hugging and positivity and kindness, radical loving honesty, inclusivity, pleasing functional interiors, simple exquisite food, and bold flattering fashion choices. I almost forget that they are real people actually doing good and not some impossible science fiction fantasy creation. Oh my God, I love those boys. They're helping save the world one loving interaction at a time, and I vote for them. The thrill and fear of knowing that I'm 58 and I will not settle quietly into my golden years, but I'll step forward to be part of the co-creation of a new world that's so dearly in need of restructure and tender loving care. The young people are not going to do this for us. And it will only happen if we work together tirelessly every day to change the narrative, and we can change the narrative. In the Bill Murray film Groundhog's Day, his character Phil finds himself trapped in an endless loop of the same day. Waking up to the same song, the same ridiculous radio personality every morning, he wastes and abuses his life in acts of greed and gluttony and self-involvement, debauchery, deceit, willful manipulation, and utter disregard for everyone who crosses his path. He finally stops the relentless cycle through deep personal reflection and an understanding that his time and energy is of the most use, is most satisfying when he's acting from a place of genuine care for others. Phil says, tell you what I do know. Even in a day as long as this, even in a lifetime of endless repetition, there's still room for possibilities. He sees the possibility for positive change and he makes it a reality. He stops his personal contribution to the cycle of destruction. After all, tomorrow is another day to make a change. And thank God for that. Because I don't want to wake up one more morning hearing Green Day's American Idiot blaring from my clock radio. It's time to end the cycle and change the station. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to thank the CCC for keeping me fed, the Morrison Center for allowing us to be able to do this work here, and also for Treefort and Boise Arts and History. Thank you very, very much. Take care.